Okay, first up is Stephanie, and you definitely went beyond the module, which is good. You kind of experimented on your own and kept building, and I think that's good. I think there's something about the proportions of that looks a little skinny, and once we get into the next module, we'll want to build some of these different. So you might want to step back from some of this stuff and delete it out and replace it with how we're going to do it in the next one, which is different from this. But all that said, it's good to kind of experiment and learn on your own as well. One thing I would say is it lacks kind of depth, that is to say the sort of thickness in this direction. If we look at some additional reference, I found these by searching Smoking Spaceman, and you can see some you can see how thick it is in this direction. It's kind of like a big cube. It's about as deep as it is wide or tall, and same with the torso. So I would probably, if you scale it, it's going to cover up the face. So instead I might right mouse click, choose vertex, marquee select these ones in the back, and then pull it back this way. And you'll still have to move this back, but it might be easier than moving all this stuff in the front of the face. And then repeat that for this one. Right mouse click, vertex, pick these back ones, and something like that. And then of course you'd have to recenter the arm. Right mouse click, object. Something like that. And stuff like this I wouldn't tend to elongate like that. I would make them all the same width. Let's say they're all, well, it's just the Y and the Z. We'd want to make the same. Let's say they're 0.3 or something. So that remains round. And whoops, move these back, center it, maybe down a little bit, something more like that. And like I said, for a lot of the other details, you might end up remodeling it based on the what we'll show in the next module. But yeah, it's looking good. Nice work. Okay, this is Maddie, and she chose to do a different robot, which is cool. We could compare it with the. So here you can see them side by side. Might have gone a little thicker on the arms. Maybe they're all right. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so those are separate from there, and I think that the way this turns out turned out pretty well. I was going to show you. I can see you use booleans for this, and I'm not a big fan of booleans. And you can see some areas got really thin here, so just wanted to show you another possible approach to doing that. I'm going to use a cube and just snap it here, and I'll go ahead and go back to this. So, well, actually, there's 1, 2, 3, 6, 7 of those, and so 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. So we kind of want like 15 equal spaces on there. So I'll go to 15. Right? Get about that width. And then maybe for the height, I'll use the multi-cut tool. For that, you have mesh tools, multi-cut, and Control-Shift-X is the hotkey. So Control-Shift-X, and I'll hold down the Control key, and I'll put something, let's say here, and maybe there. Then I'll extrude in every other one of these. So I'll select these faces, shift right mouse click, extrude face, and push those in like that. And just going to isolate this real quick with this button right here, and just take the a lot thicker than it needs to be, maybe more like that. Right mouse click, object. Okay, and then I'll unisolate it like that. And then to bend it like that, I'm going to use something called a nonlinear deformer. So deform nonlinear, and we'll use bend, and make sure this is oriented like so. Just do 90 degrees that way, and then click here, and let's see if it's bending the right way. Yeah, there we go, something like that. So whoops, and I think, you know, once I'm happy with it, I'll delete the history, edit, delete by type history, or Alt-Shift-D, and then that thing that just happened won't happen. So pretty similar to yours, but some subtle differences. One is these extra little diagonal kind of weird edges, this one doesn't have, and also just, you know, some of these thin or thicker kind of uneven areas, this one's a little bit more kind of even and perfect. So it's just a kind of a cleaner surface and more of a procedural approach to doing it. Similarly with the arms, you could do something like this. So I don't know how many of those we want. You know, let's see, it's like 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Call 14 maybe, just because it's probably one we can't quite see there. So, but then I'll do double that. So I'll do 28 height, and then a bit longer to get that, have some distance for that curve, something like that. And then I want to select every other row. Oh, and I guess there's this bottom one that's thicker. Well, anyway, I can, maybe that'll be 2 rows in this case. So I'll select one, and then shift double click, select this, shift double click, and then, whoops, let me go back, select this, whoops, shift select that, and then shift double click. So I'm holding down shift every time, and then just picking the one next to it. And that'll get those, whoops, just undoing. And then shift right mouse click, extrude face, and then pull these out a bit. The whole thing looks a little too thick, honestly, but you get the idea of the approach anyways. And then it's all one surface instead of, you know, all these different surfaces, which I think might work out better. We'll see. And then I'm going to use a bend again, actually. But then this time there's a trick to it, which is, so if I just use the bend now, see how it bends in the middle. We don't want it to bend in the middle. We only want it to bend at the top. So I'm going to move this up here, and just the low bound. So it's kind of like that. So I just did a middle mouse drag by selecting the thing, and then maybe this needs to be a little lower. Middle mouse dragging that over. Something like that. I mean, ultimately it's not that different. It's just another approach. But then it makes it one surface, and if you had to rig this to where the whole thing had to, bend, and animate, it might work better if it's just all one continuous surface than having it made up of the multiple surfaces. And then again, when I'm done, I'll do delete by type history, and that'll get rid of that bend deformer. So again, just another approach to do something pretty similar about what you did, kind of in a more manual way. But yeah, I think it's looking really good, really cute. I think the next thing is to go in and do the bevels and consider rebuilding some of these things. Just looking for other detail. I've got these. Oh, that's like a coil, I think, going up. So for that, I think I would create a helix. So click on this, and I think, no, not that width. So radius would be thinner, and yeah, and then oh yeah, you can increase the number of coils, maybe like that. And then to get it to be in the, maybe we want more subdivisions around the axis to just smooth that out a bit. And then to get it in that kind of cone shape, I think what we're going to do be a couple different approaches to this, but we could either use a lattice, or there's another nonlinear deformer called a flare, and that allows you to just don't like how it's kind of pinching that stuff, making it, the coil itself thinner, although it's pretty close to where we want to be, but it's messing up the coil. I wonder if we'll get different results if we use a lattice. Let's try that. Deform lattice, and I'm going to get rid of these divisions here. Just click on that middle mouse drag to get down to 2. Right mouse click, lattice point, select this. We might end up with the same result. Scale this in. It's about the same, yeah. I've got to think about how it can deform this and maintain the coil, that it doesn't get sort of squished like that. I'm trying to think of a way. I mean, I can think of a way to do it, but I'm trying to think of one that's easy. Alright, well, I figured out an approach, but it's a lot of steps in introducing things that you haven't done before or were taught in this lesson. So, but you can see it maintains its width throughout. It doesn't get pinched at the top. So I'll just do these steps again, and you can try following along, but like I said, it's a lot. So my timeline is set to 120 frames long. Create, and the basic thing is we're going to make a circle. We're going to make the circle move in such a way that it's kind of creating, like the path of the circle is creating the shape that we want. And then we're going to use something called an animated sweep, which will turn that into the movement of the circle into a shape. So create NURBS primitives circle. Gonna make it sort of upright like this, 90 degrees, and probably a little smaller like that, and move this out a ways, let's say to here. And then I'm going to group it to itself, edit, group, and the group will automatically be centered. And you can see if I rotate the group, see how it's kind of going around in a circle. So I'm going to keyframe, so I'm just going to select that rotate X. Oh no, not again, in this case it's rotate Y, right? Yeah, Y, I can tell by middle mouse dragging there. And I'm going to keyframe that, right mouse click on it, key selected. Then I'm going to go to the end, and let's do like 1500 or so. And then you can right mouse click, key selected again, or I have auto keyframe on, this little one right here. And now we can see that goes around. See, it slows down and speeds up at the end, and that's going to cause an issue. So I'm going to double click on the timeline, right mouse click, tangents, linear, and that'll keep the movement equal. Okay, so we've got it going round and round, and we have the group node selected right now. Now we're going to make it go up, so that's the translate Y, so I'm going to keyframe that, and let's go, I don't know, let's say about that high, and again, double click, right mouse click, tangents, linear. Okay, so now we have it going round and round and up, and now we want it to move inward. And here's the trick. So we're going to select not the group but the circle itself and use this X translate. So I'm going to keyframe the X here and then go to the end, and let's make it like 1, and it'll kind of go in towards the center there. Key selected, and again, tangents, linear. So now it starts out wide, and it gets more, it's easier to tell more from the top. Let's go to the top view. What's happening? You can see it starts out wider, and the path gets narrower and narrower and narrower. And then once you have a movement that you like, you can do visualize, create animated sweep, and it's doing that shape. And once you've got that, you can put caps on this. Oh, did this make a nerves shape? Oh yeah, it does a lofted surface. I think if we go to the options, here we can make it polygons instead. Oh, it's reversed the edges. That's not a big deal. To fix that, that's mesh display reverse. There we go. The reason I wanted it to be polygons, once I hit 3, it looks, the same as the nerves. Is if I right mouse click and got this edge here, double click on this edge. See that? I've got that last one selected. Shift right mouse click, fill hole. Now I know that looks weird now. To keep that, we need to put what I call a holding edge there. So Control Shift X, hold down the Control key and put something right there. Then when I hit 3 for smooth, it's keeping its shape a little bit better. And then we can repeat for the top. Control Shift X, put that little holding edge on there, and then double click here, shift right mouse click, fill hole. Alright. And then I think it's smart enough that if you change stuff on that original circle, it will update the shape. Let's see, for example, if we wanted it thicker, is it smart enough? Yeah, that's pretty cool. So it maintains history. So as long as you don't delete history, if you make changes to this, it'll change the resulting shape. Or if I change the animation, so for example, let's say I wanted it less tall, I can go back to that group thing, go to this last frame, and then maybe like move it down a little bit. Yeah, and then now it's updating. Pretty cool. So then you can kind of somewhat interactively adjust it. Alright, well that's, I might save this just in case you want it. I know this was beyond maybe what you were looking for. I'll just call it coil. But I don't really know of another way of doing that. There probably is some other way of doing it, but it's the best way I can think of. This is Chen Yu, and yeah, this looks good. Yeah, clearly you've gone beyond the module, which is good, and you've started to model some of this stuff on your own. I'm trying to figure out what's funny about this surface. If I yeah, I think it's probably just the soften edge thing that made it look weird, so probably wouldn't do that for this. They give it that weird kind of shadow to it, but we'll go over an approach to building this in the next module. And yeah, this is looking pretty good. I used a helix for that. That's interesting. Okay. You could. I wonder if you've kind of moved the verts around a little bit after making the helix. Looks like you've done some stuff to it, yeah. How you've deleted some of the verts there, I see. Yeah, since these are kind of at an angle, if you were going to do it this way, you might make a lattice, deform, create lattice, get rid of these divisions. I'm just middle mouse dragging, right mouse click, lattice point, marquee select the top ones, W for move, and you can kind of straighten those out a bit. And then when you're done, select this, edit, delete by type history, which is also Alt-Shift-D. That kind of helps straighten it out a little bit, and then could adjust some of them manually by moving verts around. So that could be an approach to doing that. Might have made it maybe a smaller radius on those, the helix. Yeah, so it looks good. We might end up, redoing the way you did some of these things, but it's well laid out. Good job. Next up is Tia, and yeah, you've got the basic shapes in there. Might have had a little bit on some of the details, which is alright. The big thing to fix is that these feet are wrong. We want to start with some cubes, and then we'll be using bevel to round them, and you'll see that in the next module. So we'll get rid of these spheres and put in the cubes like it's demonstrated in the module rather than the spheres. But besides that, yeah, good start. This is how you, yeah, I think it's looking alright. There's some odd things, like these are sticking out really far. If we look at some additional reference for, I just did an image search for smoking spaceman, and you can see these, for example, are really flush to the leg. They barely stick out at all. You can look at other reference, and it might be a little different, but it's still pretty close. Whereas you can see they're sticking out an awful lot. I think this can be thicker, kind of. If I right mouse click, vertex, select these, W for move, and move it back. Repeat for this. And then, did you? I don't know, I thought I saw a nerves thing or something, but these look weird because of the mesh display thing, so I would do harden edge, and I mean, what you can do is right mouse click, edge, and these guys can be softened. So mesh display, soften, but I think you want this, because otherwise you get that weird kind of shadowing stuff that it loses its definition of its shape. And we'll get this rounded using a bevel. I think we'll do a lot of this a little differently than you did. And again, you've just got a lot of stuff that's sort of sticking out probably a little further than it should. Yeah, and then after you extend the shape of that, you'll have to recenter the legs and those kinds of things. Maybe make these a bit kind of thinner, you know, certainly thinner this way, and then maybe a little less thickness, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I went too far with that. Something like that, maybe. Anyway, you can play with it a little bit. Yeah, so don't change the, you know, the softness of the edges, because you're getting that weird look. Okay. This is Hend, and yeah, looking good. Got all the basic shapes in there. I think the proportions are pretty good. I think, you know, we may end up replacing some of these. I think a lot of this stuff is sticking out too far. You've got some good reference for that. Sort of compare this to yours. Yeah, I mean, it does stick out some, but that looks a little fatter to me, as does that. And this as well. I just think all that stuff could be just pushed in a bit. But yeah, it's good that you went on, and it's great that you got some extra reference, so good work on that. Are you stretching these things out a little bit? Yeah, I would keep those, like the Y and Z, the same. Let's say they're both 0.4 or something. Just keep that real round. I think that's going to look better than having it not perfectly round. This width, it doesn't have to be the same as that or that, but I think that this width and that height should be the same as I've done here. Next up is Kareem, and first thing I wanted to point out is to be able to get this file to open, I had to change the file extension from .ma to .mb. So when you save it, if I do save scene as, and I change the files of type like ASCII or binary, see how it's changing that for you? You know, just make sure it's just the same as what it's changing it, because otherwise it won't open, and you have to know to change the file extension to get it open, which most people won't know how to do. But yeah, this is looking good. I like how you've done this seam here. I think this is an interesting approach for the for this piece. I think we'll do it a little bit differently, but that's all right. And yeah, this we're gonna have a different approach for as well. But again, I like to see that you've you know, gone ahead on your own and experimented. This seam looks nice. I think it works out well for these, and I like how you kept it nice and thin. Yeah, legs look a little thin to me, but maybe they're all right. Yeah, I think probably these could be a little bit thicker. Maybe something like that. So yeah, good work moving forward with it. We'll probably replace some of the stuff you've done with other techniques, but it's still a great learning thing to kind of just forge ahead like that. So looks nice. Okay, this is Nicole, and another one where someone forged ahead, which is good. I think yeah, I think you'll find we'll have a different approach for this. These are, rather than being something that sticks out, I think it's meant to be like a grill. Like these are indentations or sort of cut out areas. I think this stuff sticks out too far from the head. I think you'll want kind of a bit of a lower profile for that. And we'll, you know, we'll take a different approach with some of these pieces. But again, I think these stick out too far. But it's good to have kind of moved ahead. I think these should be thicker. I don't know, maybe like that. If you do a search for smoking spaceman, you can get additional reference like this, and you can see where, I don't know, something with a little bit more of a side view, where you can see some of the width and get a little bit better of an idea of how much depth there might have been to this toy. So they're not all exactly the same, but they're pretty close, so they can all be good reference. But yeah, good start, and keep going. This is Ahmad, and yeah, I think you've got some. I think you need to spend a little more closer attention to the proportions. One thing is, I really don't think you want these stretched out like that. I think, like maybe bigger than that, but nice and round like that. And I would do that for the same for the rest of them. You don't want them all. Not sure why you stretched them out that way. And also you can see this corner, and I think you want to get that tucked under the cylinder there. Yeah, the face is looking again a little out of proportion, and you've got an image plane there, so really pay attention to that and try and match that a little more closely. Yeah, you mentioned trying to figure out how to do some of the details, but that's all going to be covered in the next module, so you can pick it up from there. But yeah, pay close attention to your source image, and don't be stretching these things out like that because they don't look so good. Okay, this is Bohan, or otherwise known as Bob, and yeah, it's coming across pretty well. You added some nice detail. We might find a different approach for some of these. Yeah, again, this will be indented rather than having things sticking out. And you may find some additional approaches to give some of this stuff extra detail. Yeah, but I like that you've kind of forged ahead with it and done a pretty good job. I would say these things could be a bit, have a little bit more depth to them. They're not quite so narrow. But yeah, this looks like a pretty good likeness. Good job on this. Oh, what you do with the feet? I think we're going to do a different approach for the feet than this. So you might start over with just cubes and then follow what it says in the module. Okay, good work. This is Michelle's, and the first thing I wanted to mention was just the file naming. Your My file is just named robot, and you can imagine if I had to download 15 or so files, then they were all named robot or robot 2 or something. That would be confusing. So each assignment has a description of how you're supposed to name your file, and so just pay attention to that. Basically it should include your name and the module number, and then everybody's will be unique. But yeah, it's looking good. The feet look a bit kind of tall. I might go down to maybe around there, maybe a little smaller, then adjust the leg accordingly. Yeah, it looks like you've got some different dials on. They're sticking out a bit. I think there's just going to be an approach that's more close to the detailing on the source image, the reference image. So you might end up removing a lot of this stuff or all of it, and then replacing it in the next module with a different approach. Yeah, other than that, it's looking good. Okay, this is Adam, and you went on, which is good. I would say lacking a lot of depth in this direction. If you do an image search for Smoking Spaceman, you can get a lot more views on this character, and if this one's representative, it's just much thicker in depth. It's kind of like the head and the body are a cube rather than a rectangle. Also, the feet could be a bit thicker here. If you hold down D, you can kind of align it to the bottom when you see that align symbol, and then they'll grow up from the floor, so you don't have to move them back into position to be lined up with the floor. So yeah, I think it'll be more something like that. And and make these thicker. So that's about it. Okay, this is Perkins, and first thing before we get started on this, this file doesn't end with a .ma or a .mb, and so I had to manually add that. So make sure when you save, if I do like save as, for example, you can see it's automatically adding the correct extension on there. So really all you have to do is just leave it and make sure it has a .ma or .mb at the end. It should do that automatically, but don't delete it or change it. It looks like you're missing, if this is the shoulder and that's the elbow, it looks like you're missing the sort of forearm and hand section here. So I would add that in, and also it looks a bit big this way and that way. So you can look closely at your reference and try to match it. I would say that's true for the whole thing. You've got stuff sticking out pretty far here, and I think this stuff is a little more flush to the surface. These look really big, and I think you want the pivot point at the bottom. If I hold down D and then see where I got the align thing, it'll snap there, and then I can do a more reasonable size, something like that. So and we'll probably redo these when you get into the next module, because you'll have a better approach for getting that detail on there. So missing arm segments, adjust the size of the foot, and add the detail as displayed in the next module, and it should be good. Okay, this is Cindy, and yeah, this looks good. You've added a lot of detail, and things are looking pretty well in proportion. I'm not sure why the legs are placed unevenly. I might kind of remirror that over, and probably would shrink down this foot a bit yeah, actually I might have gone too far with that, but you get the idea. Maybe somewhere between the two. But yeah, make sure those legs are even. They look a little uneven now. And yeah, you got all the basic shapes. You got some good proportions, so it looks good. I think we might end up redoing some of this stuff in the next module with a different approach, but it's good that you got the basic idea of placing that stuff.